question here. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Last night, my mellow teen, in his frustration to get me out of his room, grabbed my arms and tried to pull me out. This is the first time, and he apologized this morning. We talked about setting expectations ahead of time to prevent this. I was asking him to go to bed, and building in daily exercise and de-stressing techniques. I know this came out of frustration, and he did not intend to grab me. I had some self-defense training and was able to loosen the hold. If this was his roommate, this behavior could start a fight in the moment. How to get him cognizant of his behavior and emotions so that it doesn't get out of control. He's a great kid, and thank you.
Yeah, so, you know, this type of thing, of course, happens to everyone, and it's not uncommon, and often we will act before thinking. And really, in his case, it was perhaps a combination of not saying, Mom, I need you to leave, which if he had said that and if you had followed through and actually left, then he would have no need to grab you. I mean, often that's very important to pay attention to, because we often do behaviors or challenging behaviors that instead of using our words. And so, like, one of the most important things for him would be to just remind himself when he can use a statement rather than an action. And of course, the other side of it is, yes, he's frustrated, and possibly that's because you told him to go to sleep or whatever it is, and so he doesn't know how to respond to that. A typical teen would probably also be frustrated if their mom told them to go to sleep and they didn't want to, but they would negotiate. Negotiation is the typical kind of behavior that's okay, socially okay, when we're not really in control, but we want to be. So that's the real issue with teens, is that they want to be in control of their own lives, yet they're not. And accepting that is pretty tough. So I think you have a number of things here you have to do, which is you really have to write out perhaps all of the things that are demands that are placed on him. Like, you know, get up and go to school, do your homework, I don't know, wear certain clothes, eat certain foods, do certain activities, or don't do certain activities, and then things like go to bed when you don't want to. And if you list all those things that occur, you could do this activity with him in his life, and then also kind of list if he's okay with them or not. Mm-hmm. Like some kids, of course, they like to go to school. You know, my son, even if he's sick, I can't get him to stay home. Whereas my daughter will happily take any excuse to skip a day, you know. So some kids like to go and other kids don't want to go. And so you have to kind of list which one of his daily activities are things that he's okay with and which ones are things that are not, that he's doing against his will, let's put it that way, against his own wishes. And when you do that exercise, it will help both of you realize that perhaps he is doing some stuff, you know, he's doing enough, let's say, or he isn't. It'll help him recognize how many things are for his own sake that he's doing as if it's a favor to you. It's not, you know, and you come to a realization that his life is or isn't fair. And that's really what's important, I think, when we do this exercise with teens, because of course, it's also important for him to understand when you say go to sleep, the reason you're saying go to sleep is because he needs, let's say, 9 hours of rest. You decide what that is, and how else is he going to get that? And it sounds like he's a high-functioning enough individual to understand those things and start to take some responsibility for them. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when we tell our teens what to do without explaining to them why, they get offended and they want to do the exact opposite of what you've told them to do. And if you explain to them why, and you know, it's a very simple thing, physiologically between these ages you need this much sleep. Now how else are you going to get it? If do you want to sleep at 10? Sure, sleep at 10, and that allows you to wake up at such and such time. Or do you want to sleep at 12, in which case you're not going to get to sleep, in which case you're going to get sick. Which choice do you take?
Yeah.
And I think when you make those things more visible to our teens, they start to understand and they actually start to make the right choices. Then it just becomes a matter of helping him cope with the frustration of having to do things that he's not always happy about. Like, we also have that, right? I mean, this morning I wasn't chipper, but I was like, I got to get up. I got to take my kid to school. I got to get to work. I just have to do it. And you get very good at that over time because you practice that. And I think it's then as the child starts to practice those things, and if you make that list, you start to realize how many things they're actually doing against their will, and then you increase the reinforcer. See, when we start to push back, which is what he did, it means he's not perceiving his universe as fair. And you just need to help him see it as fair. And doing these various things and having that conversation with him, I think, will help him.
I love that. I want to do that with Jem. While you were talking, though, it occurred to me, because I used to teach 7th grade through 12th grade with a lot of 9th graders. I got 9th grade a lot. And there's something about boys in that age range where all of a sudden bodies change.
Yes.
And they're used to being smaller than us and physically dealing with us.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, and I see this a little bit in Jem right now, that he, for the first time this year, is taller than me. And we've had to have conversations with him about, you are stronger now. So
that's a very good point.
You got to be careful.
Well.
But I remember teaching neurotypical 9th graders, and some of the boys got it. They understood I'm bigger, and they had that physical awareness that I am bigger now. And some of them didn't get it and would plow through the hallway and be knocking down the 7th graders without meaning to. And I always used to wonder, why do some of them get it and some of them don't? Yeah. But it seems like probably a lot of our kids on the spectrum maybe would be slower to get that as well.
Absolutely. You bring up a very important point. And that is that boys tend to grow so fast that I think, we all have a different level of awareness of our environments to begin with. And then I think some boys grow more gradually. Other boys grow incredibly fast. I look at my son, and I can't believe how tall he is now in what a short period of time. And it does change their entire universe, and being aware of that. I mean, in fact, I remember he and I used to wrestle and do all kinds of stuff. And at one point he said to me, I remember this a couple of years ago when he had passed my height, and he said something like, I can't get used to the idea of how small you are, And I was like, yeah, I know, but it is a process. You're right. It's totally a process for them to get used to their own strength, I saw him becoming aware of it in a sort of a wrestle with his sister, kind of like, whoa, I could actually throw her around now, I need to back off. And it's a very interesting process, and you're right, he might not be aware of it, and I think that's a healthy discussion to have with the child, and to say, look, you couldn't do this before. If you did this before, you wouldn't hurt me. But if you do this now, it's going to cause a bruise.
Yeah.
And that's just because you're stronger, you're bigger, and all that. And that discussion is important as well.
Yeah. It's a tough time, man. They've got so many changes going
on. Hormones changing, and, of course, testosterone is such a difficult hormone to get used to as well. And to adjust to.
Is it the universe's joke that they seem to hit the teen years right when their moms seem to hit the perimenopause or the menopause, that we're both going in opposite directions on the hormone chart?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, God's little joke on all of us. Hiding in our live feature. The next question that we have is, they say, good morning. Is there a way we can make my son more aware of how he behaves around his friends? He's 7. I watch him at the park and he dominates the play. Doesn't listen to his friends' ideas and yells in their faces when they don't play his way. I'm afraid he's going to lose friends. Whatever you suggest, I can help him with this summer. We also have ABA twice a week, and she can work on skill deficit as well. So he's 7, and clearly, it seems like that there's some high functioning skills there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I always am concerned when somebody says we're only doing ABA twice a week, but maybe at 7 he's at the point where that's appropriate.
No,
No. Okay, there we go.
I mean, I just twice a week is really very, very minimal. And I think that if you have the primary issue is perspective taking, clearly. He's not seeing things from their perspective, right? So he's dominating the play. He might say things, he'll yell at them, or he won't when they don't do what he wants, and so on. And 7 is a very tough age. It's the time where kids start to really separate from others, because they will, like, they'll gang up, or they turn into small cliques, and they'll be like, I don't want to interact with him because he's mean, or whatever it is. So this is a very aware mom or dad who's pointing this out, because it could very well happen. And twice a week might be something, but ideally, of course, it would be better if you had more time. What I suggest you do is you go on skills. This is now, because what you're lacking here is not one skill. It's not one skill that you're going to teach him. You're going to teach a lot of different skills that will help your son become more aware of other people's perspectives. And so skills, which you can find at www.skillsforautism.com, will be very helpful. What you do is you'll go in and you'll answer questions about your son. You can choose to just look at the cognition curriculum, but I would suggest you do all of it. Excuse me. And then the cognition curriculum will link you to a set of programs, and particularly you're going to get a lot of programs in the area of perspective taking. That is the area you want to focus on, theory of mind. It essentially, not being able to tell that he's dominating means he can't take their perspective. Not being able to tell that they don't want to play his game means he's not taking their perspective. Not being able to listen to them means he's not listening. He's not taking their perspective. There's clearly a lot of stuff. And let me tell you, a ton of other behaviors are affected by the inability to take other people's perspectives. In fact, it becomes one of, I think, personally, the most important skill that influences all other social skills. Perspective taking really can change your future in many ways. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to now work on all of these different ways of teaching him perspective taking. And in skills, there's at least 10 or 15 different lessons that you can look at, and these will teach him how to have empathy, how to read other people's emotions, how to understand that if people are walking away, that means they're not interested in the game he just suggested, how to gauge his own behavior in terms of, have I given them enough opportunity to do the things they want? Am I sharing with them adequately? Am I understanding how they feel? How do I fix the situation if I see kids walking away? How do I correct that? How do I repair the social environment? There's a ton of stuff that you can do to teach him, but really it would be important to do them in the right order. Look at the areas that he specifically needs. Give him a broad area of practice in all these different aspects of perspective taking, and it should change his life. And if you're going to focus on it in the summer, fantastic. Increase his ABA a little bit. Like, if you could do 5 days a week, you'll get through all of it in the summer. It'll be fantastic for him.
And I got to say, well, first of all, I want to, because they gave me this handy dandy little tent at Skills, since I was forgetting the phone number, but it's skillsforautism.com, FOR autism.com, and the phone number is 877-975-4559. I'm a big fan of Skills, and I have to say that the set of lessons that's around perspective taking is the most fun part of Skills.
Oh, yeah, it's
like when you talk
stuff.
about it, like I know with people who are behaviorists, when they talk about a perspective taking, they talk about it in terms that the rest of us go, what?
Yeah.
And it sounds very dry to the rest of us, but it isn't at all. It's so much fun. There are a lot of things that you will find that you interact with your child on, and that, a lot of us are craving, like, how do I when I talk to autism parents, the overwhelming thing that they talk about is I'd like to find a way to get inside their head and know what's going on. We want to be able to do the perspective taking on them, but doing those lessons with your kid is exactly what leads to that. And they're very fun lessons. A lot of them are game oriented.
Yes, very much
and so it would be a series of fun activities to do over the summer.
Yeah, and in some, I think one of the activities, for instance, the blindfold task, a lot of the activities essentially put the child in the situation so that the child starts to learn how the other people feel. So, and it's a lot of different scenarios where you actually give your child the opportunity to see how the others feel and to start to really understand how other people feel. And then there's a series of lessons around it having to do with recognizing the cues of how they feel. So yeah, I think that's the best thing you could do over the summer. It'll be very helpful.
And when you see your kids starting to get it, it's the most amazing thing on the face of the planet.
Fantastic.
And it really sets them up for success the rest of their lives.
Yes,
It's
and
incredible.
calmness. I mean, I think once we start to understand other people's perspectives a little bit better, we generally don't get frustrated as much. Life is a little easier because now you understand that people can have different perspectives.
I've told the story before on the show, so I won't belabor it, but about a year ago, my husband and my son and I went out on a Saturday morning to do something that wasn't supposed to take very long, and hours later, we came home without having had lunch. It was like 2 o'clock, and everybody was frustrated, and we came in the house, and I, was starting to bark some orders around, and Jem said, okay, we're all tired and frustrated and we haven't eaten. I suggest we all stay calm, get something to drink and eat, and then we can talk about it. And both my husband and I turned and went, all right, Dr. Phil, right? But, he was the only person who was looking at the situation and reading what everybody had going on and coming up with a solution that was productive in the room. And he was 11.
I love
That's
that.
good ABA right there, folks.
I just love that, though. I love that.
Yeah, right.
All right, we're all tired.
We're all tired. I was like, look at him reading his states and mine and his father's. Okay, yes, I have to run to keep up with him. But that's from those lessons.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
And that even sometimes when his peers are getting frustrated, he'll say, well, that's important to them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That ability is amazing in a child. It's just incredible. It's so lacking in so many teenagers. They just don't learn to slow down and observe and for a moment consider how the other person feels, and that just changes your life.
Well, let's be honest here. It's lacking in a lot of adults.
It absolutely is, yes.
And I think now one of my biggest frustrations is seeing when my son is doing all the perspective taking and the neurotypical adults and teens in the room aren't, and cutting him 3 inches of slack, and we're teaching him how to deal with that, but it's really me we have to deal with the frustration of it, right? Okay, so try that out. Try skills, even if you just did that section of it. And that's in the cognition curriculum, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on. Please help. My typical daughter ignores my reminders to talk nicely to her younger brother with autism. She yells if he looks at her in the wrong way or is bothering her. How can I get her, see, we were just talking about this, the perspective. How can I get her to be nicer, have more patience, and stop being so mean to him? It breaks my heart. And we don't have the ages on either of these children.
Right, and I have so many different perspectives on this. I want to kind of like try to throw out a bunch of stuff here for this viewer to consider. Yes, you're asking for ways to help your daughter see things from his perspective or to understand that her behavior is mean. And I guess the best way to show her that is to actually videotape or audio tape their interactions and to view it later. Believe me, a lot of our teens, when they look at themselves on video or listen to themselves on audio, will turn around and say, yikes, I sounded so mean. And they will pick that up. So that's one thing you could do. And I don't suggest, other than that, I just don't suggest that you get into a dialogue with her about it right now. See, the thing about it is that if she's yelling at him, then she has what we consider a challenging behavior. And usually, as I say, challenging behaviors come out of frustration. And so just as he would typically tantrum or aggress because he's frustrated, she is having a sort of an aggressive mean reaction because she's frustrated. And so she's frustrated most likely because he bothers her. Now, of course, he's not intentionally bothering her, but that doesn't matter because he is intruding on her life. And it is difficult for our teens, and we expect so much from our siblings where we think, okay, they should just be able to handle it. And the truth is, why? Why should they just be able to handle it? They're born into a situation which is very difficult. And to begin with, it is absolutely an unfair situation. Let's just face it. The truth is, it is an unfair situation to our siblings because they have to be the one that gets less attention to begin with. They have to be the one that's more understanding. We expect all of that of them, and that's not fair. So from my perspective, the best thing to do here is to recognize her frustrations and to give her an out. That means perhaps spend separate alone time with your daughter and do special things with her that don't involve her brother being present. Make sure that you increase the reinforcers in her life somehow for when she's doing nice things. And trust me, sometimes you throw reinforcers at someone, they'll just become a nicer person. And so instead of dealing with the issue and saying, hey, you're being mean to your brother, let's try to figure out why she's frustrated, and let's try to change that a little bit. And I think that's more where we should be focused.
I think sometimes as parents, we get so trapped in the thing about, well, why should I have to reward him for doing something that he should want to do anyway? But the important part of that is that where's the should coming from?
Right.
If we pare it down to what's in it for them.
Right.
And none of us learned how to do things that we do over and over on a regular basis without there being something in it for us.
There's always a consequence,
Right.
and it's a matter of whether the consequence is meaningful or not. For your daughter, perhaps even if you guys get mad at her, that's attention, and otherwise she would just be forgotten, So you always have to look and see how the universe balances things out. Clearly, she's being very bothered by him.
Yeah.
And that is where things have to change. Looking at her the wrong way or is bothering her, I don't know how old she is. Our teens go through their own stuff, especially teenage girls. So I think it's really important. And maybe she's embarrassed by him. I mean, let's say the things that most people don't want to say. And the truth is, a lot of teenage girls are embarrassed by themselves. They're embarrassed by their hair, by their looks, their clothes, their house, their parents, their whatever, you name it. They're embarrassed by it. So having an autistic brother, younger brother, may also be cause for embarrassment for her. It shouldn't be necessarily, but hey, this is what the environment is around our kids, and perhaps she has seen others talk about him or make fun of him, or maybe she's disappointed that he can't do a lot of things that she would like him to do with her. Whatever it is, her aggression or frustration is being vocalized in an aggressive or mean way. It's not that she means that. Trust me, she probably looking back at it will feel rather bad about it. It's just that she's frustrated and she doesn't feel her life is fair. So that's where your focus has to be.
And I think, just to let you know, we've had many different siblings on the show. We can't ever have enough siblings on the show who talk, adults and teens, who've talked about the fact that it was really hard and that they struggled. I always say that the siblings grow up to be the most
wonderful people. I agree.
And they make peace with it at some point.
Right.
But each and every one of them that turns out to be fabulous says that they went through a period of time where they were really resentful about the fact that they got saddled with a brother or sister, and why did it happen to them, and why could nothing ever be about them, and the disappointment. I love there's a show For Pete's Sake that chronicles Holly Robinson Pete's family, and she's got 3 boys and a girl, and one of the boys is on the autism spectrum, and you see very clearly from the other 3 kids, at least at one point in every show, each one of them says, "I'm sorry, excuse me, when does it get to be about me?" and that she has to struggle with that. It's real.
Yeah.
That's the way they feel. It's the way they should feel. And if we're busy accepting our kiddos that are on the spectrum for who they are, then we got to accept the other ones for who they are.
That's right.
So frustrating for you because you
Yes.
have twice as many problems because you have to deal with what they have going on too. But I'm telling you, it'll pay off. They'll turn out to be wonderful, wonderful people.
Absolutely.
They come out of the wash just fine.
Oh,
but feed
no
them.
doubt. I mean, I will say some of our most incredible supervisors are siblings.
Yeah.
Most compassionate people are siblings. They're amazing people. It's just a difficult time for them when they're
Yes.
teens and they're growing up with it. It's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, and I think too, to give them role models of other people who's the golfer that has the sibling that's on the spectrum, the young guy who just won the Masters last year.
Oh, Jordan Spieth?
Spieth.
Oh, I didn't know he has a sibling.
Yes, he has a sibling, and what a great example he has been in the last year, talking about the fact how important it is to give back. And there are many other siblings that are out there. We just had a show last week featuring a sibling that you could watch that show, and she has created an organization called Fantastic Friends.
Wonderful.
That you could start one of those in your area so that she would have other siblings to talk to.
Perfect.
You know, giving them examples of other people that are dealing with what they're dealing with so that they know that they're not the only one, I think can be really helpful.
Wonderful.
All right, we're going to take a break and then we're going to come back with more Ask Dr. Doreen, so stick with us. In real time. The next question that we have, I need to give Dr. Granpeesheh a little bit of background.
Okay.
We had a question, a topic last week where we talked about the unspoken question that we were talking about an article about Disneyland where they said that people, it's a big joke at Disneyland and Disney World that people, they count how many times every day people walk up and say, what time is the 3 o'clock parade start? And then, and like, how do you answer that? Because the 3 o'clock parade starts at 3 o'clock. That's why it's called the 3 o'clock parade. But then at Disney, they try to teach their employees that you have to look for the unspoken question. When somebody comes up and asks that, that's not really what they're asking. They might be asking, where do I need to stand to see the 3 o'clock parade? And if I stand here, does it get to where I'm standing at 3:10? Or, you know, I mean, like the whole host of unspoken questions. And then if we're good customer service people, which I think parents, that's really what we're in, is customer service. That we have to listen for the unspoken question. So that's what they were saying. They said, Shannon, how insightful of you hearing the unspoken question. It wasn't me, it was Disneyland that came up with it, by the way. On the flip side, my autistic kid tends to ask questions not quite getting to what he wants. And I think a lot of people do that.
Absolutely.
Well, that's kind of what the person at Disneyland is doing, is asking the question that's not going to get you the information that you want. When he does this, he can easily be guided to say yes or no by whoever he's talking to. I try to ask him open-ended questions and give him time to reply, or have him rephrase. I think he just answers yes or no just to answer and get out of the situation. How can we teach him not to be misguided? This is a problem for a lot of people, not just people on the autism spectrum, about anytime we're communicating with people, making sure that we're asking the right question to get the answer that answers the question. I can't believe how much in my life I will ask a question, whether it's with my son or my husband or on the phone with somebody, ask a question and they answer something that isn't the question. And then I have to say, thank you, but my question is this, right? And if you're not somebody who's that perseverant, it's hard.
You just get lost. Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I see that sometimes as well. And like with Greg, because he's just such a sweet person, and like he can get completely misguided and forget about what his point was. And a lot of people do. A lot of people do. I mean, here even like we'll have an email chain starting, and someone will write something, and everybody jumps to response behavior, like, okay, I will defend this section, respond to that section, and nobody stops to think, wait, the question being asked is not relevant. Like, we need to fix the question first, you know, so it's kind of...
You're always the voice of sanity, I have to say, that you'll jump in and say, yes, but the important part of this is this.
Or stop for a second, you know, if a parent says X, Y, and Z, they're actually right. Like, this is true. It might, you don't have to defend and say, no, this is not, they're true, it's right. Explain to them why things are that way, you know? So sometimes we get lost and we just have to recenter ourselves. Now, this question, though, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about this child, because it could be that he is being persuaded or misguided. It could also be that he just simply doesn't know how to ask questions correctly. So, with very young children, if you remember, Shannon, and Jem may have gone through this, but remember in the very, very beginning when we were teaching our kids language, there's several little mistakes they make. For instance, how are you and how old are you?
Oh,
right?
yes.
That's a common one that a lot of our kids get wrong.
Yeah.
It's just because they're over selecting and missing that one word. How old are you versus how are you? And so they answer it incorrectly. Now, when you answer that incorrectly, and we teach you over time to answer it correctly, it just is an example of how your expressive skills could also be altered that way. You could be asking questions that are not really getting to the point of what it is you need to know. So let's say there's a scenario and you're trying to ask a WH question that would help you understand, for instance, the location of the scenario. You need to ask the where question. You have to. If you ask the what or the why or the who or any of that, it might not get you to the where answer. So sometimes our kids just don't know what words to use to ask the right question. I don't know if that's the case here, or if it's that he loses track of the answer he was hoping for, so I'm not sure what the problem is, so it's hard for me to guide.
And what I read this, and this may not help you, but what I read it is that somebody asks him a question and he just says yes or no to get out of it. Maybe not even listening to the question, he says yes or no,
right.
And that she's concerned that then leads you down a path.
Right.
If you say to somebody, if they say, do you want to stay here while I go there, and you say yes, and you didn't even listen to the question, now
right.
Suddenly you're there stranded with no way to get home.
Right. So, if that's the case, and perhaps that is the case, but if that's the case, then really it's a matter of just comprehension. Listening comprehension is the main thing that we're concerned about here. And again, I feel like it would be an injustice if I said, okay, here's an example of how you can teach listening comprehension. Obviously, there's a million different ways you start with shorter phrases, you ask numerous questions regarding the phrase, then you make it into short paragraphs of let's say 3 phrases. You remember this.
Oh yeah.
And then you will do stories, and then you will do more longer stories, and then you will do books, and so on and so forth. And the whole time you're asking a series of questions and expecting the correct response so that the child doesn't just say yes or no. And then, of course, you also have to rotate those with yes or no, so that the child knows that sometimes they do say yes or no. And so it's a very long process. I would hate to just say, hey, do this one thing.
Yeah.
I think the right way to go about this is to assess what's going on with your child specifically. Okay. Are they understanding the question? Are they understanding parts of the question? If they're understanding parts of a question, then it becomes very important to go back and fill the gaps. So maybe they're not understanding prepositional phrases, and that'll change everything. Maybe they're not understanding descriptors. That'll change everything. Maybe they're not understanding past a certain length because they're over-selecting on a certain thing. So that's in itself requires a bunch of evaluation. Or maybe it's the anxiety of the situation and they're just trying to say yes or no because they're afraid of their own performance and they want to get out of the situation. That's a whole different thing. So just assessing validly what is going on with the child would require you to evaluate the circumstance. And the best way I can think of you evaluating exactly what's going on is to go in and do the skills assessment. The skills assessment will have numerous questions on this topic, but we'll have the questions in 2 forms. You'll have certain questions that address this issue in the language area, in the language curriculum, and then you'll have certain questions that go to the same issue in the social curriculum. And if you do both of those things together, you'll see, yes, he does worse in group settings or with people he doesn't know, or when the question is like, expanded or difficult or whatever, but mainly it's a comprehension issue of these types of words, or we need to beef up his language more, or no, we need to just support him in social situations, whichever one it is. So go ahead and go to skills, answer the questions, all of them, and I guarantee you will form a pattern. You'll see where the weakness actually lies, and then those are easy to work on and teach, and those are things you can specifically teach. Otherwise, trying to just teach him to answer questions differently, oh my gosh, that'll be I can't give you feedback on that, because there's a million different types of questions and a million different types of scenarios and situations that might alter how we see the question.
I just had a huge epiphany.
Go ahead.
Because as you were talking about, first you have to look at what is it that's causing whatever, and you're going through the different things. And I was thinking about that, sometimes I am this way, that if I'm in a certain state of mind, and I write in my head before I write on the computer.
Right.
And if somebody interrupts that process, I will utter things. Somehow I can say, yes, sure, do that, whatever, but I didn't hear what you said. I don't care what you said.
Absolutely.
No, and then later on, I'm like, what? I said that you could do that? I didn't say that, did I?
I don't even remember this
And then my husband goes, yeah, honey, you told him that he could do that. And I was like, I was writing in my head.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm in my right brain? Yes, I'm in my right brain. I'm being creative in that moment. And sometimes when I'm talking to Jem, he doesn't have all the skills to necessarily switch sides of his brain, and other times he doesn't yet have the comprehension. There's a lot of different things there. But I've been looking at different things that I want to work on this summer. There's a great book that I used to use as a teacher with students who have a hard time paying attention. It's called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Terry Hands, I think, is the author of it, and it's a book about drawing. But the thing about it that's great about it is that it helps you to figure out the wiring between the two hemispheres in your brain. Yes. And to be able to switch back and forth between them so that you can attend to something that maybe you don't want to while you were being creative.
Right.
And so I want to go back through the book this summer, and I'm going to do it with Jem. It's a great thing. There are exercises that you can do that are very fun.
Absolutely.
And really, for me, it was the first time that I understood that whole thing about for us as adults, when we're driving a car and we're working out a problem, and suddenly we arrive where we were and we didn't know how we got there,
yes.
But we were safe.
Yes.
We were attending to things, but we were kind of on autopilot.
That's right. That's autopilot.
And that sometimes, I'm not saying that that's the case with this individual, this child, but as you were going through why don't kids pay attention, I realized that's part of my issue, and that maybe it's an issue with my son, but at the very least, at the end of the summer, having done the book with me, he'll be a better artist. And he might understand his brain a little bit more.
Right. Now, you brought up several different things, and as you were saying, I was like, I should write this down.
I didn't give you a pen today.
No, it's okay. Hopefully I'll remember most of it. But the stuff that you said is very important, because what you're referring to, and this book, by the way, is actually used for other aspects of psychology as well, particularly trauma. When individuals go through trauma, they tend to stay away from the emotional side of their brain and activity by being very just sort of descriptive and so on. And one of the exercises that you do with individuals who've gone through trauma is to actually have them express their emotions in written form using their non-dominant hand, which allows them to then switch over and and then you actually have them draw things with their non-dominant hand as well, which is very interesting because it completely changes kind of how you express emotion, and it does start activity on the other side of the brain. We call this in our curriculum in skills set shifting.
Okay.
And it's a big portion of the executive functioning curriculum. And set shifting is tested usually through a bunch of tests, such as the color trails test. I think you might have seen that, where you have, you write out numbers or words in different colors.
Right.
Right? And then you ask the individual to either say the color or read the word. And then as soon as if it says orange in orange, it's easy to say that.
Right.
But if it says orange and the color used to write the word is green, people will have an inhibition of one or the other.
It hurts your brain.
Yes, it does. So you inhibit one or the other, and it varies which one you tend to inhibit, and that is set shifting. It's being able to switch from one sort of thinking modality to another. That definitely happens. And when we are in that kind of autopilot mode, what we're doing is we're inhibiting numerous stimuli, but we are maintaining what's called saliency of the most important things. Like, for instance, the distance between the next car. If I hear a honking, if I see someone come in front of my car, there's a certain series of extremely salient stimuli that you are still in tune to while you're driving, but you're not really paying attention to the roads or the signs anymore because you're so fluent in it. Now, you notice how many of the words that I used are in our curriculum.
Exactly.
Fluency, inhibition, set shifting, saliency. These are exact lessons in the skills executive functioning curriculum. Because when you become really good at all of them, you are very good in executive functioning. That's what executive functioning is, the ability to set shift, to inhibit, to pay attention to the salient stuff, all of that. So now going back to this question, would you have to evaluate the child and first make sure that all their content is good, their grammar, their vocabulary, their language content, before you start focusing on EF stuff or social stuff. Because those things are layers on top of, like for you, it would be extremely confusing if you had to like focus on what is in your head that you want to type and you didn't have language.
Oh, yeah.
And someone spoke to you.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So it's like one thing at a time. First, let's get the fluency of language.
Yeah.
So that might be the case. Otherwise, yes, a lot of the skills curriculum will be very helpful to this child.
Absolutely. Don't forget, Skills for Autism, FOR Autism. The phone number is 877-975-4559. And there are so many things there. The truth of the matter is that really anybody listening or watching, there's something of use to you. I think a lot of times people get stuck in my child is 3.
That's hard.
My child is 3, so this isn't right for me, and that's wrong. At 3, you can be using skills.
Oh, yeah,
and if somebody says, well, but my child's 17, and I heard that it goes up to age 8, but that's skills that begin emerging at age 8, and those are skills that at 53 I'm still working on.
Right, and these are mental age versus chronological age that we're talking about. A lot of our kids, your child might be 14 chronologically, but he may not have developed the mental skills of an 8-year-old, and so therefore he will benefit from a lot of those things.
But again, even I at 53, I mean, these are emergent skills. They're skills that you work on your whole life. So you don't really arrive on some of these. You just hone the skills. So don't forget, that's a wonderful. And unfortunately, we're out of time, and we didn't even get through half the questions.
Right, but and before we end, I just want to publicly thank Kelby for.
See, we've already forgotten you, Kelby.
You're already gone.
You're already gone.
Kelsey is my daughter's friend, and that's why it's always Kelby for having been just an amazing producer, I guess, or director and editor.
All of the above.
Everything that you've done for this show. It's been a pleasure having you here, Kelby, and we're going to miss you a lot.
Yes.
And we welcome Magic, and I call Matt Magic because our new editor, director, producer is someone who was at one of our events, wore the hat of a unicorn, and his name was Magic the Unicorn. So that's my nickname for him. Yes, and so we welcome him, and we hope that he will bring a lot of magic to our show.
Absolutely.